To intro or not to intro? Let's talk about that right now. What up, y'all? It's AKT Action, and what we're going to talk about today is if you should use intros, when you should use them, how you should use them, and everything else in between. So let's get at it. Before I start real quick, notice the independent drip right there. You know what I'm saying? Go to indieamplify.com. You can get your shirts, you can get your gear, you can get artist services, you can get features, you can get YouTube reactions, all kinds of great services and stuff. Go there right now, indieamplify.com. So with intros, you have to think about the situation. So let's just break it up into two situations. One situation is YouTube, okay? Music videos, basically. The other situation is streaming. So you have one that's a visual and one that's an audio, okay? So we're going to talk about how to think about this for each one, right? Because they're both totally different situations, and it could be the same song, and you could possibly have one version with an intro, one without, and whatnot. So we're going to go into depth about the things you should think about when you're deciding if you should have an intro or not to have an intro on your song or video. So let's go into that. We're going to start with YouTube. If you're going to have an intro on YouTube, the thing you need to think about is it has to be very, very, very entertaining and very enthralling to the viewer. If the viewer is not interested in your intro, it could cause your watch time to be shortened. And that's the last thing you want on YouTube. You want your watch time to be as long as possible. So if your intro plays an intricate role and is a really good, entertaining piece of content, then I say keep it. I say put it in there. But if you can't make an intro that's like that, if your intro is kind of dull or boring or slow, you might not want to have that in there, because if a new viewer, especially not a fan, comes there and drops out in the first 15 seconds, if that happens a lot, that hurts your watch time and that really hurts you in the algorithm. If you're thinking about using an intro on your YouTube video, make sure it's highly enthralling and needs to be there. Don't put it there if it doesn't need to be there, okay? Unless it's something highly entertaining, funny, interesting, whatever it may be. It's got to be something that's going to hook people in if you're going to have an intro on YouTube. So let's say you decided you're going to have an intro on YouTube, you have a good intro, and you like it, and you're going to use it. That's great. Try to keep it under 30 seconds if you can. Try to keep it under 60 seconds if you can. You know, you don't want it to be too long. Unless it's like very important in the video and it like sets up the entire thing, like a story or something, you don't want your intro to be too long. You want to get to the guts of the music video as fast as possible. I know some superstars make these long, crazy intros in some of their music videos, but also they have a large fan base and people awaiting their music video to watch it, and they're excited about it, so it's a different situation. If you're a newer artist or an artist with less fans, you're going to want people to be interested right off the bat. You're not going to want them to stray away too quickly. So you got to make sure your intro is very necessary and not too long. In a lot of cases, normally I tell people don't do an intro, because the chances are a lot of times most people don't pull it off correctly, and it mostly does not help the video. But if you do have a great intro and you think you have a great intro, show it to some friends, show it to some fellow artists, and let them see it and let them watch it. And don't say, do you like this? How good is it? Or whatever. You want to ask them, does this bore you at all? Or would you leave if this was playing first? Give me your honest opinion, because you're going to want to really know if this intro is good for your music video. And if it is, then that is great, because if an intro is good, it can add watch time, and that helps you even more with the algorithm. So if you can get a great intro and that can increase your watch time by 20, 30, 45 seconds, a minute, that is awesome, and that is what you want. So if you make a great intro and everybody agrees it's a great intro, then keep it there, okay? And this is, again, we're talking about YouTube. We're talking about videos. There's not much more to say about that. If you're going to do an intro, make sure it's entertaining, make sure it's enthralling, make sure you let people look at it, make sure you know that this intro is necessary, entertaining, and purposeful to the music video you are putting out. The other situation is streaming. We're talking about streaming platforms. We're talking about Spotify. We're talking about Apple. We're talking about everything else. Now, let's imagine a scenario. Say you're put on a playlist, whether it be an editorial playlist or a major playlist or just Discover Weekly or anything else. So if you're on one of those playlists and you come up next, if you have a super long intro to your song, unless it's like super enthralling or super amazing, a lot of people are going to skip, and you don't want that. If people start skipping your record on Spotify and other places, especially Spotify's algorithm, it is not going to be good for your song. With that being said, if you're going to have an intro on Spotify, you're going to want to make sure it's short and interesting. I recommend not having an intro at all if you can sometimes. I recommend starting it with the hook if you can. If you can have the beat and the hook come in right off the top, that's great. I know it sounds crazy to some people, but the reality is on streaming platforms, that is an advantage. So if you are going through songs and you're in your car and you're in a groove, or you're working out or whatever it may be, and the playlist is playing, if it bangs right into the record and it's just hot right off the top, someone's going to give it a chance and they're going to let it keep playing. But if you have this long, drawn-out intro, the odds are they might just skip it. You know what I mean? They might go to the next track, and you don't want that, especially if you get into an editorial playlist. I mean, if you get into an editorial playlist and you get skipped a lot or you get short listen times, that is not good. You will either not last long on that playlist or you'll get shoved down, in the playlist because the algorithm looks at all the data. So if you do well and you get long listen times, long stream times, you will either get moved up in that playlist or you will stay on that playlist longer. So you will want to make sure you are getting long stream times on Spotify and other platforms. That's why I would say in general, stay away from intros. Now, I'm not talking about a 4-bar or 8-bar intro, the quick intro where it's just a little instrument playing real quick and then it comes to the song. That's perfectly fine because a lot of times that plays into the drop as well. You have that guitar line playing or whatever it may be. It plays for like 4 to 8 to 12 to 16 seconds, whatever it may be, and bam, you know what I'm saying? The drop happens, and everybody loves that. So I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying those long, drawn-out intros with a bunch of instruments going, stuff like that, that can be cool, but in most cases, you're running the risk of people not listening to the rest of the record, especially if they don't know who you are, especially if you're in a playlist situation or Discover Weekly situation, Release Radar situation, any of those situations where they're not going directly to listen to that record at that time. So you want to think about that. When you're on streaming platforms and you're trying to play to the algorithm on streaming platforms and increase your listeners, you're going to want to make sure you're keeping people on your song as long as possible and you're not getting skipped as much as possible. So I would stay away from long intros on streaming platforms for your song. And going back to the other side of the house, going back to YouTube, you could have a longer intro on YouTube because you can have a visual to go with it that makes it more entertaining, that brings people in and gets them excited about what's about to happen. But see, when you're just dealing with the audio all by itself, it's kind of hard to get people enthralled, especially in like the hip hop and rap genre. And that's mainly what I'm talking about here. So if you are planning a single release, like I just said, maybe an intro on YouTube. If it is going to be an intro on YouTube, make sure it's very interesting, make sure it's very enthralling, make sure you check with people, make sure they like it, make sure it doesn't bore anyone. Also, if you're heading over to the streaming platforms, if you're distributing it, make sure you try to avoid intros as much as possible. And if you do have an intro, make it as short as possible and get to the guts as quick as you can. And maybe even do a test now and then. Try to put out a song that has nothing in front of it. The hook and the drop just start right off the top. Try it out. You might be surprised at how much more viewership you get, because when you get into playlists, even algorithmic playlists that you always get into, you're going to do better. That's really about it. If you're going to do an intro, you just have to think about, is this entertaining? Is it necessary? Okay? That's the main point here. So if you feel that it's necessary as an artist, then put it in there. But also think about algorithms and how it's going to play out. I know we would all love to sometimes just ignore that completely and just do whatever we want, but that doesn't always work out so well. And in most cases, it doesn't work out at all. So always keep in mind the algorithms and how they work. And that's how you'll win in this game every single time. That's it. It's been real. Make sure you visit indieamplify.com. This is AKT Action. I'm out.